Hi, my name is Michaela Larson, and I did my presentation on ADHD and ADD health concerns. So, ADHD is otherwise known as attention deficit disorder. It's a mental disorder that is defined by hyperactivity, inability to concentrate, and impulsivity. ADD is pretty much the same thing without the hyperactivity. Most people start to experience symptoms in childhood, and they persist throughout adulthood. Uncontrolled ADHD is when they're not when they go undiagnosed through adulthood, and that can lead to issues. So locally, I couldn't find any information on the amount, like in Ogden or anything. Statewide, 7.4% of kids ages 2 to 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD. Nationally, 6.1 million children ages 2 to 17 have been diagnosed. And internationally, 129 million children ages 5 to 19 have been diagnosed. So it's a pretty common mental disorder. The graph shown below is comparing Utah to the U.S. It only goes to 2011. This is from the CDC. So Utah is lower when compared to the U.S. So contributing factors for social determinants of health. So economic status, poor economic status as they are growing older can affect it. Environment, so an abusive environment at home, an unstable environment could contribute. Social and community could also contribute it as well, just again, at their environment. And education. So, specific concerns is ADHD kids a lot of time have low grades, and this is all, again, talking about uncontrolled for the most part. My brother, when we first adopted him when he was 6 years old, we got him into school, and his grades were terrible for a couple years until we figured out that he had ADHD, and ever since he's been on medication, he's done a lot better. So, anyway. So they'll have financial difficulties, back to the low grades, bad school performance. They're more likely to have lower paying jobs. They make bad decisions a lot of times because they're very impulsive and they don't think things through. And they have difficulty building relationships because they can be perceived as too much to handle, annoying, because they can't sit still, they're loud, etc. Okay, so root causes that I chose. So for their low grades, ADHD kids have a hard time concentrating, which results in poor school performance. My brother was known for talking out in class, talking to his friends, couldn't pay attention. Financial difficulties, as I said in the last slide, they have a hard time with education, which means there's a potential for little to no education resulting in lower paying jobs. Bad decisions, their impulsiveness can lead to bad life decisions. And then their difficulty building relationships, as I said in the last slide, they can have a hard time building relationships due to lack of attention, hard to handle, stuff like that. So this one was kind of difficult for me to decipher between. I kind of based it off of my brother. So I feel like they can pretty well take care of themselves, like physiologically and safety-wise, depending on how severe the ADHD is. A lot of times, the love, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization they struggle with. Their esteem's very low. They have a hard time with that type of concept, perceiving who they are, thinking that through. And if they have a family that they're not patient with them, they could have a hard time feeling loved and like they belong somewhere. So on anticipated functional level, I said depending on severity and lack of treatment, people with ADHD can have lower function than normal. While the basic needs are being met, the psychological needs may not be. Likely health outcomes, people with ADHD can have bad mental health a lot of times, considering their psychological needs are not being met. So communicable diseases, kind of what I focused on was STDs, because they are so impulsive and sometimes careless about their health. STDs are, I think it was 3 times more common than people without ADHD. So in order to stop this, you just need to educate about safe practices and treat the ADHD, of course. Of course, there's probably a bunch of other diseases they can get as well, considering maybe bad hygiene sometimes. I know we had to remind my brother a lot to shower. So, okay, and then non-communicable diseases. So, since those diagnosed with ADHD are impulsive and have bad decision-making skills, they're more likely to develop something like diabetes or cardiovascular disease because of their poor eating habits. Again, they struggle taking care of themselves a lot of the time, and so that leads to poor eating, poor exercise. They have a hard time concentrating on one thing. And then they have a lot of other coexisting mental conditions such as autism, learning disorders, speech problems, Tourette syndrome, conduct disorder, depression, anxiety, bipolar. There's a lot of them listed. Getting diagnosed and treated with medication/therapy is the number one way to help this population. So, again, in the last slide I said that they suffer from depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety is highly common in those with ADHD. Their self-harm and suicide are more common in untreated patients, of course, because, like I said, they have low self-esteem. They could have issues with building relationships. Depending on the household, they could feel like they're a burden. So just educate the parents on signs and symptoms of suicidal ideation, and educate the parents on communication and resources as well. So risk for harm by and to others. So since people with ADHD are impulsive, they are likely to have uncontrolled emotions because they're quick to anger sometimes. They can be more aggressive than those without ADHD because they have flare-ups of uncontrolled emotions. They are also an easy target for bullies because of their impulsivity, lack of understanding, and clumsiness. Education, support from parents and teachers, and a safe environment are all ways to mitigate harm to others and from others. And that is my PowerPoint, so there are my references, and thanks so much.